Today I want to show you how to set up your Air 3 so that you can get the best possible settings for the most cinematic footage and the smoothest movements possible in all the flight modes. And we're going to walk through all the settings to help you get your Air 3 set up the best way you possibly can. Moving across the remote really quickly, if you don't have the RC2 and you have your phone, it's okay, it's about the same. But in a Mode 2 controller, which is what I'm using, this controls the up and down. In other words, you gain height or lose height, and then you rotate the drone left and right here. And then this controls the forward and backward movement, and then the side to side movement of the drone. So those two controls together do that. On the front here, on the pause home button, if you just tap it, it will stop doing anything like active track or quick shots or anything like that. So if you see the drone is about to run into something and you don't think it's gonna stop or doesn't detect the obstacle, you can tap that and it will stop doing whatever it's doing and just hover. If you push and hold it down, it will actually return to whatever the home point is set at. So if I push and hold this, that beeping means the drone is returning to home, which means it's coming back to wherever it took off from. If you want to cancel that, you can either hit the red X or hit that button again and the drone will stop. Then you've got your mode selector button where you can select between cinematic or kind of tripod slow mode, normal mode, and sport mode. And then your power button, which like I said earlier, you push and hold to turn on and off the drone. And then on the bottom, you have two custom function buttons that you can program to be kind of what you want. I use this to tilt the gimbal down all the way and tilt it back up to level. And then this one turns the bottom light on and off. Across the front, you have your photo button here and you have your video button on this side. And then you have two controls here that basically this one controls the gimbal pitch up and down. And then this one controls the zoom, because I don't really have it set to do anything else right now. On my Mavic 3, I have this one set to control the aperture, but this one doesn't have an aperture, so we don't have that option. Now, jumping into the actual app, we're gonna move across the screen. Up on the top here, you have what mode the drone is in, normal mode, and then it also gives you warning messages here, error messages. If you tap on that message at the top there, you can see here and quickly set your return to home altitude, the max distance or the max altitude you want to allow it to go, depending on where you are. And then the max distance you want to allow it to fly. And then below that, you have your SD card storage amount and your internal storage amount. And here you can also format, if you tap format, you can also format the SD card and the internal storage. I'm not going to do that because I've shot a bunch and I don't want to lose it. And then moving across the top here, you have your battery percentage, which when you're flying, it will show you how much time you have left to where you need to return to home, and it will come across there. And then also that timer there across the top will give you an estimated time of how much flight time you have left on that battery. Then you have your RC signal link strength, very important. Next to that, you have your obstacle avoidance. Right now it's off. If I were to turn it on, then the obstacle avoidance will turn white when the drone is in flight. Then you have your GPS satellites. It's important to make sure that that is white and not red, and that it also says home point updated before you take off. If not, your drone will likely fly away when it tries to return to home. So make sure you have a good amount of satellites and that the satellite icon is white. And then moving down, we have the modes where you can select from photo, video, master shots. You can go to quick shots, hyperlapses, or panos. And then in each one of these modes, you have normal, night mode, slow motion for video, and then photo modes. You have single shot, auto exposure bracketed shot, which means the drone takes a lower exposure, a middle exposure, and then a higher exposure that you can combine later. You can also do burst shots or timed shots. To be able to do any of the automatic smart mode or smart shot features, quick shots, stuff like that, master shots, you have to be in flight. So here we can be in master shots. And then it will tell you, yeah, you can do this. So you select a subject if you wanted to, and then hit start, and it will start to do the master shots. We'll go into quick shots here. You have droney, rocket, circle, helix, boomerang, asteroid. And then if we go down to panos, you can pick your different pano photos that you want to do, and hyperlapse mode. You can decide if you want it to just kind of do whatever it's going to do, if you want it to circle a subject. If you want it to course lock, where it's just going to fly a direction and take a picture, however often you set it, you tap on this little arrow here and you can set your interval, your length, and your speed. And then you can also do waypoints, which is what I technically use, or I like to use the most because it gives you the most ability to get the shots exactly the way you want them. And when you're in hyperlapse, if you want to get the highest quality hyperlapses, then it's best to set this down here to raw, to where it saves all of the raw photos and you're able to keep them going. And then panoramics, Give you lots of different options where you can do a super wide angle photo, you can do a vertical pano, a 180-degree pano, 360 photo, which this drone does have enough up tilt on the gimbal to do a true 360 photo where it doesn't have to fill in the top. And then below that, we have our record button. And next to that, we have the 1X and 3X camera selection. So you can switch between the 1X and the 3X camera. I don't use digital zoom, so I only use the 3X or the 1X, and then you have your autofocus on and off button here if you want to have it on or off. And then if you want to see stuff that you've already shot, you can push the play button when the drone is on and go through what it's in here. And then you can also save some of those to the controller so you can view them when the drone is off if you would like to. The bottom right hand corner, you've got the auto mode, which basically the drone shoots everything by itself, and when it's in that mode, it gives you the option to shoot and select different resolutions and frame rates. Only up to 60 frames a second though, because anything more than that is actually slow motion and you need to go into the slow motion video mode. But I usually shoot 4K 30 because I like getting the most amount of quality out of it. And then how much storage you have left. Now, if you put it in pro mode, which is where you should be, then you can set up a lot more settings. So you tap down there and it pulls up. You can set your white balance, which could be on auto, or you can lock it. I always recommend locking it because otherwise it will change quite a bit. You have your resolution and your frame rates, you have how much storage you have, and then you have your color mode. So you can shoot in normal color profile, which is what I recommend if you don't plan on color grading anything. You have HLG, which is kind of a high dynamic range profile, and D-Log M, which is a very flat profile that gives you a lot of options to color grade. Your color assist tool basically turns it from a very flat color to what it will look like-ish when it's color graded. And then you also have your coding formats, which only in normal mode you can switch between H.264 or H.265. H.265 is a better codec, but if you have an older computer, I recommend H.264 because it's a little easier for your computer to work with. And then if we tap on the aperture icon there, you can set your shutter and your ISO to either manual or automatic. I usually set my ISO to automatic unless I'm really wanting to lock in, and then I set my shutter speed to be 1 or 2 times my actual frame rate. And that gives you the proper amount of motion blur. Now, to do that right with the Air 3, you're going to need to use ND filters, which there are not a lot on the market yet, but hopefully there will be, and I'll probably have a video out about them when they are. But so in the meantime, I do set my ISO at 100, and then my shutter I just set on auto for it to be able to auto expose there. And then you can adjust or compensate if you want it to overexpose a bit or underexpose a bit. Then you can set that there, or you can just leave it at 0, which is typically what I do. But I also always shoot in D-Log M because I want to get the most amount of dynamic range out of this drone that I can. Now, if you're not going to color grade or you don't really want to worry about all those settings, then just put the drone in auto. The drone will do a great job of capturing footage overall and give you some really nice footage to be able to work with and post on social media and stuff like that. But if you're doing a little bit more professional work, then I definitely recommend setting those settings the way I just showed you. If we go into photo mode, essentially it's the same, but there are a couple of different options here. You can choose JPEG, which is kind of a ready-to-go photo out of the box. You can post it on social. You can choose RAW if you like to edit your photos really deeply, or you can choose JPEG and RAW so that you get both options and go from there. And then you can also choose your aspect ratio of 4:3, which is what you see on the screen, or 16:9, which is more of the widescreen format. And then below that, you can choose your 12 or 48 megapixel options. On this, I go back and forth. 48 megapixel does have a little bit more detail, but 12 I feel like just has a little bit nicer quality to it, so that's up to you. And then over here again, you can set all your settings to be either automatic or you can set them up to be the way you want. And for the most part, you can easily just shoot photos in RAW, in auto, or in JPEG, and you'll get some great photos because the drone does do a good job overall. And then coming across to the lower left-hand side, we have the distance, how far the drone is away from the spot that it took off, and also how high it is from the height that it took off at. So it's not, you know, a from ground level wherever it is. If you took off here where I'm, 30 feet above the water, then it's going to say 0 when it takes off, and then from here up, it's going to say plus whatever. Or if I go down lower than this, it'll say minus whatever. And then you also have, above that, you have your miles per hour or your meters per second or whatever you set yours in, if you're imperial or metric, kilometers per hour. how fast it's moving forward and backward, side to side, and then how fast it's moving up and down. And then next to that, you have maps, which you can minimize if you don't want to see, or the one I like to use the most is this circle, because it'll always show you where you took off from, and you can head straight back toward yourself if you tend to get, or you get lost when you're out there filming somewhere and you can't figure out exactly where you were when you took off, because everything looks the same. And above that, I have my histogram up at all times so that I can kind of get an idea of where my exposure is laying out. From the left side is how dark, the darkest darks, and to the right side is the brightest whites, and making sure I'm not overexposing. Above that is your takeoff button, which you push and hold, and the drone will take off, and then hover at a height of 1.2 meters, so a little over 3 feet. And then you have your waypoints button, which is great to be able to set waypoints and be able to set and program really great, cool shots that you couldn't do if you weren't flying the drone personally. Now, up in the upper right-hand corner is 3 dots. If you tap on that, it takes you to your deep menu settings. So here, for safety, you have your obstacle avoidance sensors. You can have it bypass obstacles. You can have it just stop if it detects an obstacle, or you can turn it off. Side note, in sport mode, there is no obstacle avoidance, and in low light, there is no obstacle avoidance because the sensors have to have enough light to be able to see obstacles. And then you have your bypassing options. Normal mode is very much what it's been for the last few years, and nifty mode is something new in the last 2 generations of drones that DJI's put out, where it tends to try and make a smoother movement around obstacles. Nifty mode carries a little bit more risk, and you have to say okay when you switch to it. Below here is where you can display the radar map. So if you want to, even with obstacle avoidance, if you want to see how close you are to obstacles, and it will turn from amber to red as you get closer, then you can turn that on and it will be a good reminder. But remember, the radar map will stay on regardless of if obstacle avoidance is on or off. So it can lead you to a false sense of security if you think that obstacle avoidance is on because you're seeing the radar map when it's actually not. And then you can have return to home, advanced return to home. Have it do an optimal route where it kind of figures out the best way, most battery efficient way to get back to you, or you can have it do a preset where it basically goes up to the height that you set and flies straight back towards you, and then your return home altitude. And here, update home point. I can't do this while I'm not in flight, but updating your home point is very important if you're in a moving vehicle or in a boat or somewhere like that where you're out over open water and you're moving. Because every once in a while you need to update your home point so that the drone knows where home is. Otherwise, when it hits a certain point, especially if you've been driving or moving for a little bit, then the drone is going to go back to the home point it took off from because it thinks it only has enough battery to get back there. So updating your home point periodically, especially if you're operating out of a boat or a moving vehicle, is really important to make sure the drone knows how much battery it has compared to where it needs to go. And also, if the drone starts returning to home, it doesn't go back miles away from you, and it actually comes back or nearest to where you are at the moment. Then of course you can set your max altitude, max distance here. Here's where you can calibrate your compass or your IMU. I only do that if the drone asks me to. Otherwise, I leave it alone and the drone does just fine. And then auxiliary LED. There's an LED at the bottom that will turn on or off, or you can leave it on auto. And that's helpful for lower light settings when the drone wants to see and hold its position. I've used it to illuminate myself at night for just for fun sometimes. And then the aircraft, the front arm LEDs, you can have them on or you can have them auto. When it's in auto, they will turn off while the drone is recording. This is important, especially if you're filming in low light and you don't want reflections in glass, or you don't want to have the drone cast a green hue over your subject because you're filming close to a subject, so turning those off is great. And then unlocking a geo zone here is where you go to if you need to unlock a area that you're flying that you have permission to fly in. That's where you go to download that unlock license or that key to the drone, and then it will allow you to fly in areas that you couldn't normally fly in. It's important to make sure you have permission to fly in any of those areas that are geo zone locked, because chances are those are actually areas that you shouldn't be flying unless you have permission. Find My Drone is something where you can have it, it will show you where it is or was at the last point, and you can also start it flashing and beeping, which is handy if you accidentally crashed into some leaves or bushes or something like that and it's a little bit harder to find. It will help you find it there. Then you have your advanced safety settings, which is when the signal is lost, if it becomes disconnected with the controller for some reason, it will return to home, it will descend till it lands on the ground, or it will just hover in place. I always have mine set to return to home. And incidentally, Even if you operate with obstacle avoidance off, if the return to home for signal loss kicks in, it will turn obstacle avoidance on as it tries to come home. So, and then you have your emergency propeller stop, which is down into the center or outside into the bottom corners. It takes a couple of seconds, but then the drone motors will stop. So if you really need to get out of the air quickly because maybe there's a manned aircraft coming and you're not able to avoid it, then doing that will cause the drone to drop out of the sky and fall to the ground. Better that than having some sort of other incident. And then here in the US, you can enable AirSense, where the drone listens to ADS-B from other aircraft. It doesn't transmit ADS-B, but it listens to ADS-B and will give you a warning if other aircraft are in your area. Moving over to the control tab. Here you have where you can select between your metric systems, metric being you can choose between meters per second or kilometers per hour, and imperial. I'm in the US, so I use imperial. And then subject scanning. When you're in flight, you can automatically detect, it will automatically detect subjects like people, cars, other things, and you can just tap the plus button to follow them or start tracking them if you want to. Below that is gain and Expo tuning. We're going to jump into that in just a sec. And then you have gimbal mode, follow mode, which is the gimbal stays nice and level, gives you that really nice smooth footage, or FPV mode, where the gimbal will actually tip and tilt as you turn. I always stay in follow mode because I fly FPV. You can calibrate the gimbal here, recenter the gimbal, which is essentially where the gimbal will snap back up to center and level. Stick mode, I use mode 2. I think most people use mode 2, but if you need to change it, you can change it there. And then here is where you can program your buttons. The C1 button or the C2 button, and also your dials. So you can change it to zooming in and out, to adjusting the focal length. You can adjust the EV, shutter speed, ISO, any of those things. And those are the only options for the dial on this side. And the dial on this side is set to control gimbal tilt no matter what. But then you can also set some combination buttons, so where you push and hold the C1 button and the right dial will adjust your shutter speed. Push and hold the C2 button and the right dial will adjust the ISO. All right, gain and Expo tuning. This is probably the thing that I get asked about a lot, or the most, because you get really smooth footage. Part of it is practice and experience, but part of it is also the settings. So in cine mode, we're going to start there. I set my max horizontal speed generally anywhere from 2.5 to 5, maybe 6 miles an hour, and my max ascent and descent speed are 3-ish miles an hour, right around 3. The reason I do that is a lot of times when I'm filming myself or filming a subject walking around, I want that speed to be slow to where I can really basically just push the stick at the full movement of the stick and it will keep speed with the subject. Below that, the angular velocity, 30 degrees per second is the max amount the aircraft will move in the yaw movement when you move to the left or right. So 30 I found is pretty good. Yaw smoothness is 8. That's how long it takes the drone to stop moving. When you stop rotating it, it will slowly come to a stop or quickly come to a stop. I have it set to 8. Brake sensitivity I set at 100. And then my Expo tuning, I like to keep the center of the sticks fairly sensitive so that I can make minute movements and have it I make fairly decent movements and have it make minute changes to the drone. So I have it 25, 25, and 25. And then the max control tilt of the gimbal, I have it set at 10 degrees per second. And then I have it set for tilt smoothness, which is how long it takes the gimbal to stop when you stop giving it a tilt movement, at 15. Now for normal mode, here I've set, it's basically the normal mode that comes with the drone, 26.8 miles an hour, 13, 75 degrees per second, 8 again for yaw smoothness, brake sensitivity again at 100. And then here I did change my Expo tuning a little bit from 0.25 to 0.2 and 0.25 on up, down, yaw, pitch, and roll. My max control speed tilt is still 10 degrees per second, but I changed my tilt smoothness to be a little quicker at 10. I don't remember if that's degrees per second or something else. But then sport mode here, everything maxed out because I do like to fly in sport mode a lot. So 47 miles an hour, 22.5 miles an hour for ascent and descent speeds. Angular velocity I have set to 70 degrees per second. and then a yaw smoothness, again at 8. I like that 8 figure, but I set my brake sensitivity a little bit higher, actually a lot higher, basically at 150, because in sport mode, if you suddenly find out you're coming to the end of where you can fly without hitting something and you need to stop quickly, you want that brake sensitivity up there quite a ways. And then for Expo, I did 0.35 for my up and down movement, 0.25 for the yaw movement, which is the turning left and right, and then 0.3 for my pitch and roll movement. This I felt gives me the most amount of control over my drone and getting the smooth movements with everything. For the max control speed, for the tilt, for the gimbal, I have 30 degrees per second, which is quite a bit faster, and then a tilt smoothness of 10. And that, along with a little bit of practice, can give you some really great shots at a lot of different speeds. And then we move into the camera settings. So here, depending on if you're in photo mode or video mode, you'll have two different options. We'll start in video mode. You have your format, MP4, and then your color mode, normal, HLG, or D-Log, and then H.264, H.265 if you're filming in normal mode, but in D-Log you only get H.265, color display assist, coding format, video subtitles. If you turn these on, it will record a file that will give you all of the information about the drone that you can use, like VLC, media encoder, or handbrake, to be able to see those files that will tell you the white balance, the ISO, shutter speed, all of that stuff in a little subtitle. I don't use that ever, really, so yeah. Anti-flicker I have in auto when I'm not filming in pro mode, but anti-flicker is only available in auto ISO. And then histogram, this is where you turn that on and off. Peaking level, this is where if you're using manual focus on the drone, which is nice on the 70mm lens, then you can turn your peaking mode on high so that you can see red lines around whatever is actually in focus. So if I put this on autofocus or take it on manual focus here, and if we change, then you can see those red lines move from the foreground to the background, and then if you go far enough, it just goes back to autofocus. Here you can turn your overexposure on and off, which will tell you basically if any of your whites are being blown out. And then grid lines. You can turn all of them on, or for me, I just use the rule of thirds. I feel like that gives me enough information to get good framing. White balance changes there. Style. The Air 3 has a lot of sharpening in camera, so I have mine turned down to -2. I feel like that gives me a nicer image overall. I can always add sharpness in post if I need to, but I prefer to have the sharpness at -2. Noise reduction, you can also do from -2 to +1. I leave mine at 0 on this. I find that that's fine. And then overall, then you have which storage you're recording to, if you have an SD card in, or just the internal storage at 8 GB. I wish they would give us 32, but they have not yet. Custom folder naming, you can create folders that you want to save your footage to. So if you've like shot one project for, say, real estate, house one, you can name a folder, put all that stuff in there, and then you get to the next house, you can name another folder and have it save everything into there. And then custom file naming, as it is, it says DJI, the year, the month, the day, the hour, the minute, the second, which is fine. It's a little long, but I just leave it as is. And then cache video when recording. So here is where you want to have the drone actually send and the controller record a low-res file of what the drone is seeing at the time. This can be helpful if you lose your drone and you need to try and go find it, or if you crash. Unfortunately, it doesn't record everything up to the last second, but it does give you at least a little bit more information than you would have if you do crash your drone and you can't find it. And if you need to reset the camera parameters, you can do that there. Switch to photo mode, and I'll show you the camera photo settings. So there you can see the overexposure warning. So here, again, this is where you can select a lot of what we saw earlier, JPEG, RAW, JPEG plus RAW, 4:3 mode, 16:9 mode, 16 or 48 megapixels. Your anti-flicker, it's on because obviously I have auto ISO set in here, and then your peaking levels, overexposure warnings, and a lot of the rest of this is pretty much the same. And then your transmission. Here is where you can select either 2.4 gigahertz, which is better for longer distances generally, or 5.8 gigahertz if you're going to be just close by and you want the highest amount of video quality available, or you do dual band, which is what I leave it, and the drone will automatically detect and select between 2.4 or 5.8 depending on where the interference is, how far away it is, and things like that. You can have the channel mode be in auto, or occasionally if you're in a very RF dense environment, you can put it on manual and select a channel where there's the least amount of interference. Auto does a really good job. I would leave it there. And then your about. Here you have the name of the drone. You can name the Wi-Fi if you want to connect to it with a mobile device like a phone. You have the app version, and then also the aircraft firmware version. You can check for updates here. The RC firmware version. You have your FlySafe database version here, and then you have your serial numbers for everything else. There, it's important to have your serial numbers if you're going to apply for GeoZone unlocks, because DJI will need the correct serial number in order to send it to the correct drone. So you need to know those there. And then if you're in the US, that serial number is also your remote ID. So you need to make sure you have that information when you register your drone to be remote ID compliant. Now next, you're going to want to watch this video over here to see how you can improve your drone videography and photography. I'll see you over there. As always, if you have questions, ask me in the comments below, or you can join my live stream, which happens most Wednesday nights at 4 p.m. Alaska time, 8 p.m. Eastern, or we can have a little bit more of a conversation and maybe answer questions I didn't answer here. I'll see you again soon in the next video. Cheers.